Welcome back to Arise Prime Time. I'm Charles Ikokwu, and I have our guest analyst with me for the rest of the program to offer her perspective on some of the talking points and what you might have heard on the show today. And the journalist, political affairs commentator, and Arise News analyst, Dr. Constance Ikokwu, is here with me in the studio, bright and yellow like the sun.
Yes.
Thank you very much indeed for...
It's Friday.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a day that I cherish from the bottom of my heart. But let's start with the update that we got from Abike Dabiri-Erewa there on the plight of the Nigeria. I mean, Abike Dabiri is the CEO, chairperson of the Nigerians in Diaspora Commission. She deals with a lot of these kinds of things in association with the foreign ministry. And she seemed quite agitated and disturbed that the Nigerians, that they had put a lot of effort into moving to the border with Egypt, are stuck there.
Yes, anyone would be. It's such an unfortunate situation. And for me, it's not surprising at all because I have passed through Egypt before. Well, last December for the first time, I flew Air Egypt. And it wasn't a nice experience at all. It was a flight full of Nigerians, and other people coming from other parts of the world. And we had a connecting flight in Egypt. And I think we arrived way before 7 p.m. And they were supposed to put us in a hotel for the connecting flight the next morning straight to Abuja. Do you know that we were in that airport till maybe about 1 a.m. We got to the hotel maybe about 3 a.m. in the morning. Terrible. And they told us we had to wake up and get up to go back to the airport by 5 a.m. It was it was a terrible thing.
I can imagine.
And, I mean, I can't imagine any other airline doing that. So Egypt, this shouldn't be, this is a war situation. There should be special clearance.
Absolutely.
I'm not a diplomat, but I would assume that these are special circumstances. So people should be cleared specially because they are fleeing a conflict situation. Nobody asked for this, it happened, and people have to pass through your country, which seems to be the only reasonable way to get to where they're going to.
Well, it seems bizarre to ask someone in a war zone to go to an embassy that's probably been evacuated, to go and stand there and apply for a visa with bullets flying all over the place before you come to the border.
It is. I know there might be fears here and there that all sorts of people, but if these people are together and you have officers of the Nigerian of the Nigerian embassy with them explaining that we know these people, they are in buses, they are together, we want them to cross over, that should be able to happen. I hope that the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Geoffrey Onyema, is able to speak to his counterpart and this is resolved so that...
yeah, well, he certainly will, but the reaction of the Egyptians, because, even Abike Dabiri herself seemed a little bit wary of the people who had joined the bus, who were not originally scheduled to be there. And that might be one of the reasons why concern is being raised across over in Egypt. But let's turn to Ikokwu Peterside, who just left there, and he wrote a really interesting article about how democracy crumbles in Nigeria, and part of the blame, or most of the blame, he placed squarely at the feet of politicians, irrespective of which party they're from. And I imagine that's something you would not disagree with.
No, not at all. I was listening to him and he made sound, reasonable arguments. I haven't read the article. But the thing is, I was wondering also when he was speaking, what about his party? His party has been in power for 8 years. If the electoral victory of President-elect Bola Ahmed Tinubu is not upturned, they have another 4 years. So that means the suggestion should be particularly to the party in power, who can begin to make the change, both within the party and in other arms of government. So I would imagine that that's a good place to start.
And he talked about the perpetrators going without punishment. And that was something that bothered him a lot. A lot of what he talked about was also in relation to his own state, Rivers State, where there's, Rivers State has a history of violence during elections. It doesn't matter who is in power, although the PDP has been in power there. But there's always a lot of stuff there. So I can imagine what a challenge it is for someone trying to if you like, upset the apple cart, and how difficult that would be.
I mean, he used
life-threatening.
Yeah, he used the word impunity, and rightly so. But that impunity doesn't happen only in Rivers State. It happens in other parts of the country, and especially at the federal level. Again, with the last with the last 8 years, with the President Buhari's government and the cabinet and the ministers, and we saw the kind of impunity that happened across board in the judiciary, all arms of government, all sectors of the country. So again, look at the mirror and speak to yourself and see whether you can do something about it. If they do continue in this government, if President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, or President-elect, is sworn in, this is something they can begin to work on as a party.
Otherwise, the conclusion would have to be that more and more it seems like the voting process in Nigeria simply doesn't decide who leads. And in those circumstances, what's the point of voting?
Exactly. That's what many people have said. I mean, there were so many polls before the elections. And then after the elections, someone else was announced. And people say, oh, that means the polls were not correct. It may not be so. It may just be that in Nigeria, elections don't matter. You go and vote, people concord votes, and then, figures and numbers, and then announce the vote. So there is no way the polls would work accurately, because the circumstances and the things that are happening are not so inappropriate. So that's and it happens both at the presidential level, at other levels of government. So if the president does come into power, it is something that has to be done about the Electoral Commission, about elections. They have to matter. If they do not matter, then don't call yourself a democracy. It's just a banana republic, not in functions, and that's so sad and unfortunate.
And he says that looking at the last general election, the level of awareness of Nigerians and the resistance to attempts to manipulate the elections and so on and so forth, that would act as a spur for reforms. Do you agree with that?
It may or may not. Like when the elections are finished and the president-elect was announced as the winner, we're all covering it. A lot of people were dramatically depressed, because they were not expecting that. But the process of the elections were things that they challenged and they thought was fraudulent. And so people are hoping that the courts now that the Labour Party is in court, that they get fair judgment. And if they do not get that judgment, I think a lot of people might just fall out, and decide, this is not worth it. I am getting out of this country, or I'm doing nothing. It might also be that some, especially the young people who have driven this movement, will continue and say, you know what, this is the only country that we have. We are going to fight until we remove the entrenched interest. It's a long battle. It's a difficult battle. It is tough, but it is doable. Right. And I think, if your country is worth it, then you have to fight.
Well, I certainly hope it's the latter. I want to thank you very much indeed, Dr. Constance Ikokwu. You can go back to your party.
I will. And you get yourself a can of beer.
Yeah, well, actually, I'll do more than that. I'll have a bottle of beer. Okay. And the journalist, political affairs commentator, and Arise News analyst, Dr. Constance Ikokwu. Thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome, Charles.
And you're watching Arise. We are come to the end of the show. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Have a good weekend, and we shall meet again next week. Bye-bye.